Alrighty, so let's talk a little bit about Redux. Cool. What Redux? Why Redux? How Redux? Um, what Redux is a data store that is accessible from anywhere in your React application. It does that by kind of like Router does. It puts a wrapper around your entire app, and then you can use. You don't have to use hooks, but use hooks because it's way easier. You can use hooks to read values from that store and send messages to that store, which will set values or do other things. So why do we want to do that instead of just keeping our state in our app component and passing state up and down? As I'm sure you've already experienced, once you get down past a layer or two, that becomes untenable. You can still do it, of course. People do and have before Redux was a thing. But it makes it way easier. Instead of having to pass data down to a component that passes down, that passes down, passes down, and the middle components don't have anything to do with it. You just say, hey, here's my sort of Redux store that lives in the app, but not in any component. And then any component that needs to get at it can just point at it and get stuff from it and set stuff to it. And it behaves like React Redux behaves like state does, in that when a state changes or when the store changes, React will update the component that uses it. So no big surprises there. That's pretty nice. The other big advantage is that you don't have to worry about the wiring and the architecture, right? So if you have, you have something that's wired down four layers down, and you're passing stuff down, and you decide that it needs to belong into another component, instead of having to take all the wiring out of the intervening components and wire it back over here, you literally don't have to do anything. It's just a component that lives in a different space, which is what components are supposed to do. That's the promise of components, right? Is that we can just reuse them wherever we need to and not need to worry about where they're hooked up. So that's cool. Disadvantages. It's kind of heavy lifting to set it up a little bit. It's a different paradigm is a big word. It's a different way of thinking about where you're keeping your data. But I think it forces you to better consider what is like application data. So like if we're doing a to-do list, the application data is the to-do items or the user profile or reminders or whatever. Separating that application data from the component state, which is what we want to use state for. So state is like, what's in this form field? Is this button clicked or not? Is this modal showing? Are we in dark mode? All sorts of stuff like that. So I like to think of component state as the state of the component, like only data that affects that component, not data that is being presented by that component. Whereas the application state, the application store, the application data is the sort of domain data that we're thinking about. And having that nice clean separation really makes it easier to sort of think about how our components work versus what data we're working with, which again is a nice way to separate that. So what, why, how? Oh boy. So a little bit of Redux philosophy. And of course, stop me at any time if you have any questions about any of this stuff, because it's all new. So Redux works through hooks and components, just like anything else. Basically, what you have to do is to hook it into your app, you wrap, usually in your index.js or some top level component, you wrap that in a provider that says, hey, everything inside this app has access to a data store. That's the easy part. then you create a data store, which is a reducer, they call it, which contains the data you're working on, which is just an object. So you'll have, I mean, it can be literally anything from like a number to a giant object of arrays of objects of things, right? But it's a JavaScript object. So you take that object, and that's your data store in your reducer, and then you combine it with a set of actions that handle it, that handle the actions going to it. Hook up a set of actions that manipulate the data. So for example, I have a to-do list. This is my data object, and it has to-dos and a list of to-do object items with priority and date and title. How do I want to act on that data? We might want to add a to-do. So our action might be add to-do. We might want to delete a to-do, or complete a to-do, or edit a to-do. So each one of those things that we want to do, we create an action for. The way that works in practice is that our reducer is that file that has both the actions and the data store in it. We say, here's our initial data store. Here's a function that takes an action. And depending on what that is, we're going to return a new state. So the reducer takes a state, so an object, and an action with some data probably, and then it returns the new state. And that's just like how useState works, set state. We combine our data with a thing, and then we return the new state, and that's our new application state, or application data. And anything that looks at it updates. And this is upsides. It makes us think about our data and exactly what we want to do with it, so that nothing unexpected happens to it. If all we have is add and delete to-dos, and some programmer tries to edit a to-do, they can't, because there's no action for it without running an action. So it keeps our data in a coherent state, and it gives us a really clear API internally of what we can do with our data. Downside is a little bit of setup. You have to write your reducer, which is the big switch function, basically, the function with a big switch statement in it. And then you have to do like all the manipulation inside that. You also have to write the actions themselves, which is way easier than it sounds. An action is literally just a plain old JavaScript object that has like a type and maybe a payload. So if I have an add to do action, the action is just going to be an object with type, add to do, payload, the title of the thing. And we send that action to the reducer. It does its thing, updates the state, and we're all good. So that's setting up that part. Then we have to think about how we send those actions to the reducer. Used to be a much bigger pain in the butt. Now we have a couple hooks that help us with things. The hook we use to send messages to the reducer or the data store is called use dispatch. And that gives us a dispatcher function. We say, hey, dispatch an action with some data, and it sends it off to the data store, updates the data, does our thing. So use dispatch is how we affect the data store. How do we get stuff from the data store? That's use selector. So basically that says, it's a hook that takes a function that says, hey, given a data store, what do you want out of it? So we can say use selector, to do item this, and then it'll take the data store, look for that item, and return us the item, or the whole list of things, or whatever you like. So that's how we get data out. So we have this nice cycle of create a data store, send actions to it, change it, select from it, update our React stuff, and the circle of life continues. And that's mainly it. So, and why is it so complicated? Because it is. It's based on a pattern, a software pattern called Flux, which basically has this like one-way cycle of send an action to a data store, that changes the data store, that sends a message back to your view. So it's a nice little model view controller. Then you have your model, which is your data store, your view, which is your React pages, and your controllers, which are the actions that change things. It's a nice way data flow, one way, keeps everything nice and coherent. Once you set it up, it's super simple to use. Setting it up, a little bit of overhead. There are tools to reduce that overhead. I don't know if we'll talk about those today, but they are everywhere.
Quick question.
Yeah,
so would it be basically like standard that when you are coming into a project and there's I think the term is like, I don't know, legacy code, whatever, there's already Redux set up.
Yeah.
So there's already that like container outside of the app that's set up. So basically what a junior might be coming in to do is just adding to that container.
Yeah, or not even adding to it, just using it, just sending messages and getting data from it. You might be writing new actions or reducers, but it's possible you'll just be like, here's the data store, change the data and use the data. Did that answer what you're asking?
Yeah, gotcha.
Cool. Yeah, any other questions about the general flow of it? I thought I had a nice picture of it. Let me see if I can find it.
Maybe the picture will help, but like I think what might help is like just say in like plain language, like step 1, set up the reducer or whatever order that comes in, and then like step 2, dispatch. That might be a little bit more clear, because like reading over the Redux stuff, it's kind of like just to set up one thing, I find myself like losing my train of thought.
Yeah, and if you're setting it up for a to-do list or whatever that has one thing, it seems like it's not worth it, and it might not be. Who knows? But as your application grows, you're definitely going to be way happier once you have that data store instead of passing a billion messages around. So I just posted the GIF to the chat that kind of demonstrates that cycle. You have your state. The state gets selected by the UI. The UI has some actions that you can do. It dispatches those actions. Those actions go to the store, change the data in that store through the reducer, and that state changes and comes back. So it's just this nice little cycle, and it'll become clearer, maybe not necessarily as I build it, but as you play with it, it starts to click eventually. Again, just like anything else, it's a matter of practice. Yeah, so that's kind of like the structure and philosophy of stuff. Questions about that before we look at some code? Or write some code, I guess. Cool. Let's write some code. How about that? I'm just gonna pop into the to-do list thing we worked on before, since there's already some code set up there. Why not? Just gonna get chat up too, so I can see that. Awesome. Cool. Find flows. Bio. Great. Cool. So I went ahead and started up the front end. Maybe remember this from our auth stuff. We're not going to use any auth stuff. I'm just going to use the homepage to demonstrate what we have, since I already have this project open. Cool. So this is a to-do list. So let's just have to-dos to do. And so I think the to-dos will be Oh, actually, yeah, okay. We'll start with the to-dos. To-dos will be a list of objects with content, and we'll start from there. Make it simple. Cool. So here is our app. This has all the login stuff we worked on before. Not going to worry super much about that. We're just going to work in our homepage here. So let me just put a little H on here to spice things up. Cool. So yeah, so what we want to do is add a list of to-dos. We're going to have our list here, have some ULs in here. And it'll just look like that or something. Wow, what does that do? L-I-U-L. Nope, other way around. Other way around. I know HTML. Yep. Super know HTML. Okay, much better. Cool. So and let's do a little form here. So actually let's put it in a component while we're here, right? To-do list. Hey, there's no to-do list component. Let's make one. To-do. And what did I do wrong? Export default function, to-do list. Perfect. Then we'll just import this. Great. And right away. Perfect. Cool. So let's go ahead and so where do we want to start? We want to let's set up our data store. How about that? Cool. So there are tools to do this. I recommend looking up RTK or Redux Toolkit, but we're going to roll this one by hand, I think. Which means I need to look up how I did it last time. Yes, exactly. Yes, perfect. That's that one. Yeah, okay, cool. I know what I'm doing. Sweet. Yeah, that seems right. Actually, I'm gonna pop open a different project here for a second. I'm gonna look at. Yeah, I think that works. Cool. So I'm gonna make a couple things here. I'm going to do. Where is it? Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to throw. Well, those are already in lib. Yeah, I'm just going to throw it here now. I'm going to make a new. So this is where I'm going to create my reducer first. The reducer is the data store and the function that handles our actions and returns a new data store. Then I'm going to hook that up to the application. Then I'm going to use that to grab data from the store and display it. And then I'm going to hook up a button with an input field to throw stuff in there. That'd be a good demo of the whole cycle. So first thing I'm going to do is set up my data store. I'm just going to call it store.js. Great. So I want two things. Basically, at the end of, well, first off, why don't I install Redux first? I need to install Redux, and I need to install React Redux, Redux React, React Redux, React Redux. That's not a thing it'll tell me. So this is installing the libraries, kind of like React and React DOM are two things. So React is the core update stuff and display it on the screen, and React DOM is the hook that up to a browser, and the DOM part can be swapped out. Same thing with Redux and React Redux. Redux is a generic data storage library. You don't need React to use Redux. You can use Redux just with plain JavaScript if you want. That's actually how I learned it. So then React Redux is the way to hook React into that, and that's what gives us all of our cool hooks and stuff. So what we want at the end here, I'm going to import this into our application and use it to create the wrapper. So what I need out of this is the store itself. So I'm going to export a store. And I'm going to use a function from the Redux, not the React Redux, just the Redux library called create store. So it's import, is it create store? Maybe. Yeah, from Redux. Cool. And create store is a function that we get from Redux that takes two things. It takes the reducer, which is the big function that handles our actions, and a default store. So when we haven't done any actions yet, that's what it's going to return. So create store takes those two things, wraps it in all the Redux magic, so it can do all the stuff we want. So I'm going to say, I'm going to create two things. I'm going to create a function reducer, that'll do something. I'm going to create a, nope, not a function, it's a const default store. That's just going to be an object right now. So I'm going to create store with the reducer and the default store. And this is a fully functional, this is a fully functional, I mean, not functional, it's a fully valid Redux store right now. We are taking the reducer, which is a function, which right now doesn't do anything, and the default store, which is empty, and creates a data store object. It won't do anything, it doesn't have any data, but you can still plug it into an app. So let's give it some data and some stuff to do. So like I said, the default store, we're going to have a list of to-do items. So we'll call it to-dos. And that's just going to be a list. All right. Right now, I'll just make a list of strings. We might want to change it later. Cool. So the reducer. So this is a great store. All we need is this list of stuff. Maybe we'll add the username after and hook it into all one stuff. So right now, we want to be able to, let's just hook up adding things to the store. So this reducer is the thing that gets called when we dispatch actions to the store. What does an action look like? It's just a regular object, right? So an action looks like, so it'll be like type, and we'll say it's, add to do, and payload. Here is it. And that's it. That's the whole, like, that is what an action looks like, just an object. And so we're going to be sending these objects from our React part, and it will get caught by the reducer here, update the data store, and return the new value in the store. And the circle of life continues. Cool. So this reducer is a function that has a particular setup because it's plugging into this framework. So the reducer takes two things. It takes the store you want to change, which is the current store, and it takes an action. Sautre, French for store. Marché, an action. Cool. If there is no store, we're going to say use the default store. So the first time it initializes, it's going to set the store to the first store. And now this create store, that's the actual thing that holds the current version of the store in it, which is cool. And the reason it, back up for a point of philosophy, the reason it doesn't just replace stuff in the store, it creates a new state, just like use state in React does it. We want to keep that state atomic and immutable. There's some cool tools you can use in for Redux, some plugins that you can like use Redux in your app, and then it gives you like a timeline of actions, so you can see all the actions that were done on it. And since those actions are sort of atomic, you can actually like time travel back and forth through the state of your app, which is really, really, really handy for debugging. And you can like see what the actions were that were sent and what the state is as you sent it, and be like, cool, I'm going to go back to here before all this stuff got messed up, and kind of just step through it to see what the state is at any point. So it's a huge, huge selling point of Redux, is that debugging and time scrubbing ability. Cool. So we have, let's say this is our one action we want to do so far. We want to be able to add a to-do item. So basically the body of this, I'm not a big fan of switch in general, but this is how it's going to work. The body of this function is going to be a huge switch statement. And we're going to be switching on the action type. Action type, yes. And so whatever the action type is, that's the thing we're going to do. So in our case, we want to look for case, come on, baby, add to do. So if there is, if there's an action to do, sent, add to do, we'll do this thing and return the new version of the store. Right now, I'm going to add a default case because it's yelling at me. I hate getting yelled at. We're just going to return the store that was passed in. So this says, if there's an action that we haven't handled, if someone sends us some garbage action like delete everything or change everything to butts, we're just going to ignore it and just return the store that's there. So in this way, we know that only the things that we have told the store that it can do is going to happen. Great. So how do we add the thing to the store? Simple. Same way we use state. We need to set the state to a thing. So we need to set the store to the new state that we're going to get. We're just going to, by setting, I mean return. This function returns the new set of the state. So for starters, we're going to spread out the store. So whatever's in the store is going to be there already. And we want to add something to it. In this case, we want to add the to-do to that to-dos list, which means we need to do another little spread here. So we're just going to spread out the to-dos. That's going to be store to-dos. And we're going to add the action payload, we'll call it, because that's what I call it up there. And why is it yelling at me? To-dos. 3 dots. Great. Cool. So this is idiom that we use in React all the time. We're spreading out the store to say, make a copy of everything in the store and return it. In addition, we're going to set to-dos to a copy of the to-do list with everything spread out. And then we're going to add the payload, the string at the end that we want. So now, when we send it this message, it's going to say, oh, is an add to-do message? It is, great. Let's return a new state with that to-do that you sent, the payload on the end of the to-dos list. Once it gets updated, it's going to send a message out to all of its subscribers and update the thing when it's selected.
So like action dot playload is the set state.
Payload.
Payload.
This kind of whole thing is the set state. That action payload is what is being added to this part. Yeah. So basically what this is going to look like is get some space to type here. So we're going to have a dispatch function. We're going to say const dispatch. Let's use dispatch. And that's going to get us the dispatch function to send stuff. And then we're just going to say in wherever we need to, probably an event handler. We're going to dispatch, and let's just make the action here. And that's going to be type to do payload. And then we're just going to dispatch that add action. And so this is the action we're sending. Dispatch says send the action to the store. That will take it. It'll look at the action type here. Add to do. Great. We're looking for that. It'll take the payload. It'll return a copy of the store with a copy of the do's with that payload at the end. That'll update the store. And then in our JSX, we'll have something like, here's our list. I just find I'm copying this later. And we'll do a map over the list of things. But first we need to get the list of things. So up here we'll say, and this is use selector. So it'll be const to-do lists, to-dos, call it to-dos. And so we're going to be using this use selector hook. And this basically says, look into your store and give me back what you want. So we're going to say, here's our store. I want to get the store to-dos. And so to-dos, when the store changes, it's going to run this again and say, hey, from the store, give me the to-dos item out of your store object. And then here I can just do to-dos map and then blah, 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 blah there. So that's basically the whole cycle there. We get the thing, display the thing. We'll have an input field that does this on submit or whatever. They'll dispatch this action. This action gets caught by the reducer. The reducer does the thing. Use selector updates the thing. That displays the thing. A lot of work just to do it to do. When you have a dozen things, you're going to be way happier. I also use this to hold stuff like, I'll hold the token in this if I'm doing JWT login. I've written games that use sockets for real-time stuff. You can throw a socket in here and say, hey, when I want to send a message to the socket to the other players, pull it out of the store. Keep logged in state, keep your whole game state in there if you want to. It's an object, you can throw whatever you want in there. Sweet. So I think that works there. So, but none of this is going to work until we hook it up to the thing. So let's hook it up to the thing. I'm just going to leave. I'm going to put it in lib because it belongs. Should be out there with all the regular proper things. Sweet. So wow, we've got a lot of stuff wrapped around that already. Cool. So I'm actually going to put it. I'll put it outside the router. Doesn't really matter as long as it's around the app. Cool. So I've got some more stuff to import. I need to get a provider. I'm gonna need to get it down here. So I'm getting that from React Redux here. And so a provider is just a component, and all the component does is say, hey, all the components inside me, I'm going to reach in and add a couple of hooks to you to use to do that dispatching and selecting. So I say provider, and the provider needs to know what your data store is. And fortunately, we made a data store. We're going to hey, we made a data store. So use that store. Great, thank you. And so I'm just going to wrap that around there. Cool. I think that does it. That's less hard than I said it was going to be. So again, like this is why having an index and app separate is nice, because you like have all this overhead in your index and never have to think about it in your app, and keep your app nice and clean like that. And so, in the app, we don't have to worry about the provider and store and all that. That's all put in from over here. So set this one up once, forget about it. So this basically hooks your whole app up to the data store we just made. Now we just got to use it. And I already wrote a lot of that code. And so look at this. Here's the app. App doesn't know anything about the store or anything. Here's the home. Home doesn't know anything about the store or anything. I'm going to go into to-do list. And in here, we're going to use the store. In fact, before we put some stuff in, let me just put some startup to-dos in here. 1, 2, another thing. Cool. So we have 3 things in our to-do list. Let's see if we can get them out. So our app doesn't care about it. Our home doesn't care about it. Our to-do list cares about it. So here's where we need to get our selector. So I'm going to say just what I said before. To-dos equals selector, bloom. And that's importing that from React Redux. I'm just saying from our store, get us the to-do list. And this is like, if you are familiar with math notation, it's kind of like how functions work in math. You're saying like x, y goes to x squared or whatever. And that notation is similar. Store goes to the to-dos from the store. Now we just need to map over it. Bleep. That's what I'm just going to do here. To-dos. Nope, other way around. To-dos map. To-do is going to get an li. The key is going to be random. We can never do this. Yeah, the odds is going to be the contents of our to-do. So yeah, this is just a list, just like any other list. So we're just going to map over it like any other map. Is it going to work? Maybe. Default was not imported. Not exported as store. Nope, I exported as store. So let's get that there. Not by default. Cool. To do. That's just a word to do. That's not what I want. Yep, that needs to be inside. Hey, look at that. All the stuff from our store got on there. So again, just to trace through this, we have set up a data store. This is our default with a list of strings in the to-dos. We created the store from our reducer and our default store, which is here. We're exporting that. In our index, we're grabbing that store and we're importing the provider component. We're saying, hey, make a provider with our store in it. And that's going to wrap the entire app so it can use those hooks. In our app doesn't care about our thing. In our routes, home doesn't care about our thing. To-do list cares about our thing. So if we had our to-do list up in the app, we would have had to pass it down to home and pass it down to to-do list. If we want to use something else somewhere else, all sorts of wiring. Even in a simple case, it feels like this is worth it already. So since we're wrapped in our data store, we can use that use selector hook and just saying like, hey, from our data store, grab to-dos. And then that's just an object like anything else, an array. So we're just going to map over it, take all our to-dos, put them in list items, and voila, there we are. So that's getting data out. Questions about that?
So like you made, so like in the store itself, this object that we made was just like our own quick array of like a data set, but that const like default store, that would, if we were working with a backend, that would be like us fetching like how, like is this where we would be like fetching to, and then kind of I guess I'm trying to find the words to describe what I'm asking.
So I think so if we have our to-dos on our backend, we would probably start off with an empty array here, right? Then in probably our app, because that's going to be the main level here, we would do a use effect where we do our fetch to grab our stuff. And instead of setting each one individually, we'd probably do something like set to do's or something, and that would take that would be a list of to do's we'd get back from our fetch, and then we just add them to the store, like something like the to do's would just be the action payload, because the payload would be the list of stuff we got from the fetch. So we would just set the whole list to that to initialize it there. And then once that gets set, it just gets read like we just did. Does that make sense?
Sorry. So like, let's say we're fetching a path and then the promise is the payload.
So whatever we get back from the fetch is the payload.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so we might do something like, up in our app here, you do our use effect. That's how you do it. That use effect, do we need to import that, right? Cool. And then in our thing, we're just going to do, let's just do it here. Why not? So we'd be doing our, fetch from our API there, and then, res JSON, then, and we get our JSON back and do something with it here, right? And so this something here is going to be the dispatch. So if we say, use constant dispatch, let's use dispatch. So that's just getting us the dispatch function here. And so when we get our fetch back, we're going to say dispatch, and we're going to say like, this is going to be inside the end then, JSON. Our JSON is going to be blah, 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 blah. Cool. So we're getting our JSON back there, and so we're going to dispatch a object that's going to be our action. So it's going to be action type set to do's, was it? And our payload is going to be our JSON. So if we're getting back just that array, right, we're going to dispatch that. So we do our fetch. We're going to fake do our fetch right now. We get back this JSON. So instead of console log, we would be doing this dispatch. So we're getting the dispatch from the hook that's hooked into our store. We're saying, hey, send an action that looks like set to do's. And that is an action we are handling here. And then we're going to send this array of stuff. And so the store is saying, hey, get an action. Is it add to do? Nope. Is it set to do's? Yes. We're going to return the store, and we're just going to set the to do's to that payload. And then once that happens, anything that is selecting from that is going to update. So if I did it right, hey, it worked. So this is kind of simulating what a fetch would do in our app. Does that kind of get at what you're asking at?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So we can set it that way. And look, we just made another action super easy. How much time do we have? Oh, we got a little bit of time. Let's set up that input real fast. How about that? So I'm going to just make a quick controlled form here. Form submit equals something. I'm just going to have a input equals to on change. We're going to set the state. So we're say const new to do state. That's not what I want to do. I want to do set new to do, and it's going to start off as an empty string. State is imported there. Great. On change, we're going to just set new to do to value. Great. And the value is going to be new to do. Submit. What did I do there? Yeah, great. Value. What did I do there? What did I do there? On change. This is close off there. Basic typing. Great. There. Fantastic. And when it gets submitted, I'm gonna have a function here that's gonna say to do. Dispatch add to do. Cool. So we need to get our dispatcher. So that's just getting the function. We don't need to pass anything. And I'm going to say dispatch, and I'm going to make our action here. So it's a type of to do. And the payload is our new to do. Cool. And on submit, we're going to, and yeah, I don't think we need to do anything else with there. Dispatch add to do. So when that form is submitted, and just in case I'm going to clear it out. Cool. So our form here is saying we have an input field here. Great. When we submit it, when we change it, it's going to control the form, keep our to do up here. When we submit it, it's going to dispatch an action with add to do with a payload of whatever's in the field. That will go back to our store, kick off this action because that's our type, add that payload to our list, and then whatever's selecting from it should update. So, hey, oh, probably messing the use effect up there. Let me fix that. I'm just gonna get rid of that. And I'll leave an empty one. Let's see if that works. Okay, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? That was this, right? That's not it. What did I do wrong there? Let's find out. So one of the cool things here, I'm just going to get rid of this right now. One of the cool things that you can do here, since anything that changes the store is going to be going through here, right? We can see every action that comes through. So we can say console log, in reducer, action, type, payload. And so now anything that changes the store is going to show up there. So now maybe I can debug this better. Cool. So it initialized it. Great. Init. I'm going to add it to do. Oh, I know exactly what I did. What did I do wrong? The most basic mistake. As I am. Okay. Didn't prevent the default. But cool. So now we can see here. I put that fetch back in, that fake fetch. And the first thing it's doing is doing a set to dos. And we can see, hey, we're calling a set to dos action with this data. And in fact, it did that. And now we can add stuff. And it does that. Let's put our set to dos empty so it clears out. Great. And so now we can see any action that we do gets sent there. 2 minutes. Maybe a couple more. One little stretch goal here. You're going to be doing this kind of thing a lot. You're going to be writing these actions out a lot. So one of the things that I like to do, and it's kind of a good practice, I like to create an actions library that will create those for me given a to do. So, or given whatever. So I'm going to make a file called for default, or what do I want to do? Nope, not default. Export function. I'm going to call it add to do. And so all this is going to do is take a payload and return a function that looks like that. Super easy. And I'll do one for set to dos. See why we do this. So now I don't have to remember what the names of the actions are at all, even. I can just, from here, const add to do equals, out like that, import up here, import add to do from. So I'm importing that from our actions library. And then, so that's just exporting a function that takes a payload. So that is our new to do. And what that function does, it creates this action for me, which seems really simple now, but already it feels better because in here, I don't care what the actual action name is. I just care about what the action is, not what it's called. So as long as I import this action, it works fine. Same with here. I can import set to dos. Come on, buddy. Import set to dos from, where am I here? App.js. That gonna work. And I can just say dispatch set to dos with our JSON. It's gonna give me an error, right? No, great. Cool. So again, this seems kind of trivial right now, and it kind of is. When you have a dozen functions that may take different things, or may have a default value you don't want to have to set every time, it just keeps you from having to remember what the key names of the actions are, and like exactly what it looks like. It's just a nice little helper functions. Redux Toolkit has some nice things that automatically generate reducer functions and these actions for you, so you can just like import them. So that's a nice little get up there. The other cool thing you can do, if you have a big app, you're gonna have a giant reducer, which is not always ideal. So you can actually like make a different reducer for different resources. So if I have a game state reducer and a to-do reducer and a user reducer and all that stuff, I can make those reducers separately and then combine them all into one big thing that gets used in my store. RTK helps with that too. You may not use it for your project here because it might be a little bit advanced for that. It's for bigger projects, but no reason you can't. Super handy little tool. And that is the whirlwind tour of Redux. Fire hose, a lot of stuff. But here it is. I'm going to check this into Redux branch. I'm going to push it up there. The code is already in the repo. Great. So that's there. Any questions? Probably lots, but any I can answer now. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. It's probably hard to even know where to start asking stuff. But yeah, feel free to use this as a little template. Clearly, you can't use it exactly as a template, but this is the general structure. Feel free to copy paste bits, understand what they do, and kind of like get a feel, even if it's just a simple thing like this. And again, like I can add as many actions as I want here. Delete to-dos, reorder, set priorities, change the way that the actions look, all sorts of stuff. Sky's the limit. It's just JavaScript. So yeah, play with it a little bit. And when you run into stuff, let me know, and we'll talk it out. Get you all set up. And of course, if you don't feel like using this, don't worry about it. It's a nice to have, but when you feel like you need it, when you feel that like I'm passing too many things around, it's really nice to have. It's a really good feeling to tear all your stuff out and replace it with Redux. Awesome. Last call for questions. Cool. I will post this in the usual places. Thanks for hanging out. I'll post it in the channel and on the playlist. And yeah, any questions, give me a holler and I'll be here.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks.